I get asked a lot why I do mission work. I'm Brooke, and this is my why. In 2016, I had no idea that would be my last trip for almost 2 years to the country of Peru. When I found out that the trip and all trips moving forward would be canceled, I cried. My heart broke. The very air I breathed seemed to leave my body and not return for minutes. I remember getting off the phone with the team leader and being in complete shock. As I sat on my bed, my life seemed to shatter. My calling seemed to have been destroyed. My thoughts quickly turned to the people in Ayacucho that I had served and the children there. Who would serve them? Who would guide them? Who would love them? Who would show Jesus to them? Fast forward 2 years, and a lot has happened. In the 2 years, I received training and became certified to lead teams out of the country. I traveled to Belize to do mission work and led 2 successful teams there to do construction and evangelism. To the outside looking in, people thought I had given up my calling to go back to Peru. But the truth was, I didn't know how to go back to Peru with no connection in the Methodist Church. It was at the beginning of 2018 where God started to move my heart more. I learned what I needed to in order to move my calling forward and to go back to where I knew I was meant to be. There was only one thing that stood in my way: myself. After weeks of praying and working on the best way to break the news to my pastor, I decided there would never be a good time, but I would feel much better if I just threw the crutches aside and trusted God, if I just relied on Him and His understanding and not mine. Not too far into 2018, I reached out to my pastor and said that we needed to have a talk about the international missions. And that's when I told him that year would be my last trip to Belize as the team leader for the church. My heart was in the work and the people, but my soul ached to go back to the place I had fallen in love with. It ached for the people that God called me to serve, and my soul craved to once again be back in a place that I called my second home. God was calling me back. God was sending me back to serve the people. God was sending me back to partner with them. God was sending me back to love them. God was sending me back to restore my relationships there, and more importantly, God was sending me back to finish what He had started in 2012. I remember the day I crafted my message to Pastor Marco. I remember writing and rewriting it over and over because I was afraid the answer might be another shut door. But I finally worked up the courage to send it, and as I hit send, I gave one short prayer. May your will and purpose for my life be done. It was a long day of waiting, but I remember the exact moment when Pastor Marco messaged me back. I was at a banquet at work, and like I had all day, my phone was clutched in my hand as I greeted people. I felt my phone vibrate, and I glanced down at it, and the only thing I saw was Pastor Marco's name. For a moment, I was taken back to the phone call that had started that long 2 years leading to this message, and my heart must have skipped 10 beats. I hesitantly opened the message, and to my unbelief, Pastor Marco had agreed to help me fulfill my calling, my purpose, my life, with mission work in Peru. I was going back to my calling, and it would happen in the fall. That moment is burned in my mind as the day that God restored my calling, as the day He reconfirmed that trusting in Him is really the only thing to do. It is burned as the day that God opened the door for me. Due to many unforeseen things, I wouldn't go on that trip for that year due to a medical emergency with my health. But He used that year to prepare me for what was to come on my trip in the fall of 2019. That trip was both terrifying and beautiful. On that trip, I met so many amazing people and the families I visited with, and I found myself and Elizabeth constantly praying the same things with the ladies, having conversations around the same topic: restoration. Hosea 6:1-3 says, "Come, let us return to the Lord. He has torn us to pieces, but He will heal us. He has injured us, but He will bind up our wounds. After 2 days, He will revive us. On the 3rd day, He will restore us, that we may live in His presence." Let us acknowledge the Lord. Let us press on to acknowledge Him. As surely as the sun rises, He will appear. He will come to us like the winter rains, like the spring rains that water the earth. On all of my trips to Peru, it seems my last trip was the most about restoring. But I can see the theme through all of my trips. From team members being restored on their journey, to meeting single parents who pour out their hearts with you about their failures, to talking about their journey from being addicted to drugs to being addicted for Christ, how prostitution was their life, but through Christ they were saved and were restored. The theme of restoration is one that is all through the Bible. God constantly wants to restore his people. Even though there are stories of restoration everywhere in the world, I find the raw openness of the people I meet in Peru to be a shining light of the restoration that God is doing in our world and that he continues to do in my life and in yours. The theme of restoration is one that is all through the Bible. God constantly wants to restore his people. Even though there are stories of restoration everywhere in the world, I find the raw openness of the people I meet in Peru to be a shining light of the restoration that God is doing in our world and that he continues to do in my life and in yours. The people of Peru are willing to use their testimonies about God restoring them and giving them life as an example for all. As an example that just because you might have fallen down doesn't mean your life is a waste, doesn't mean that you cannot be used, doesn't mean that you are forever broken. But the complete opposite, that when you have fallen down and have been lifted back up to the righteous path, that your life is a testimony of God's restorative love. That when you feel like you are useless, God shows you that he can refine you in his fire and use you in ways you never imagined. That when you are broken beyond repair, he will come in and bind up your wounds, making you a beautiful masterpiece that reflects who he is. Peru has shown me that in order for God's restoration to occur, we must be open to the possibility of rejection, the possibility of shut doors, the possibility of our plans not going as we hoped. For me, that was when the door of my calling was shut, and the 2 years walking around in the wilderness of my mind, wondering why this would happen, when I heard his calling so clear many years ago, only to be shown that in order for the restoration to occur, I would need to lose everything that I loved. But it was in that loss that I learned about God's purpose for my life, his promises that will come true. It was in that wilderness that I learned what I needed in order to do the work he has prepared me for. 2 years ago, I thought I was ready to go back to Peru to start my mission work over, but God had a different plan. He had a different lesson that I needed to learn in order to be prepared for the people that he needed me to meet. This year, I'm not able to go back to Peru because of the coronavirus, but I can tell you one thing. God is planning something amazing for that trip, and lives will be restored. Lives will be changed because he is the God of restoration, and I hope you will join me on his new journey.